but I cannot suss it. I'm just about to make a video on the Speculative Society in Edinburgh, and the sun's dimmed and you can see shadows everywhere, but there's no cloud over it. I don't know how they do that. That's the first time I've seen it. And I've just made the video and broadcast it about the Rothschilds' links to Luxembourg, Switzerland, Belgium, and I cannot see a cloud anywhere near the sun, but I can only see half of it, and it's doing that pulsatile number. And I've just been listening to Robbie Williams singing about eternity, but I cannot, because I'm a simpleton, interpret the message. Can you see how ill lit we are, and can you see that there is no substantial cloud? It's right in the middle of a piece of blue sky, and it has every feature of what we call an eclipse. And I don't know, because I don't get the news anymore, what that could be. And can you see the pulsatile action? You're not really supposed to look at the sun. That's why folk wear specs, sun specs. I used to buy into all of that. I now look it right in the eye all of the time, because I understand that the sun god is my friend. I don't understand how many sun gods there are, and it will come pouring out again soon. Can you see now the profile of a second stellar object right in front of the sun? When we were promised an eclipse when we were on the Isle of Skye, which is the joke about Scottish clans being looked after by their landlords, and all of the colonial issues, all of the sinking ships things, all of the tartan slaughter campaigns are a joke about the links of the Isle of Skye to the Jewish nation. That's the shofar blowing the bugle, all of the stuff that the MacLeods have run in the crashing ship's empire. Now, this was probably predicted by our peers at the BBC, but because I do not get the news, it's quite bewildering. We were promised an eclipse, and I did get one when I went to Queenstown in New Zealand, and Queenstown was dobbed on in the videos I made yesterday. I'm going to ask my neighbour if that's what this is and whether it's been predicted. How's it going, Davey?
You get a good look, a good view.
Was it predicted?
What?
It's an eclipse of some sort.
It's a prediction, yeah.
Was it predicted on the telly? I haven't got the news anymore.
It's on now at 9:20, 9:30.
So what is the object in front of the sun? What's? Alright. That's amazing. I just beginning to make a video and the sun was pouring in. So how long does it last?
An hour or two, I think.
Alright. Thank you.
Okay, John.
And is that her heading back home now?
No, just wait for the weekend.
Alright. Cheers. So the BBC got something right. We'll stop making this movie now, because it's going to last maybe an hour or two. And it's the middle of the day, and the moon is in front of the sun. And isn't it sad that I did not really understand mathematics, but that the chemists at Otago nominated me for a Nobel Prize in chemistry? Because they have a fine sense of humour, until all of the acts of God and the massive floods that consumed Otago University consume Otago University, and all of the people that used to live in Cambridge live right on the shoreline. I cannot remember the name of the neuroscientist from Cambridge. Alan. He had links to Southland, where the rugby commentator and the lawyer Brian Moore was very offensive to the Southland citizens when he went on the British Lions theft project in 2005. He offended the Southlanders and all of it is the same cheap shot tricks. The reason I keep making videos about the man Wood, who's the Irish rugby captain for nearly a decade and was a really great player, is that his dad had a cardiovascular arrhythmia problem and he dropped dead in his midlife, right in a very young person. That happened to me at the Aylesbury Rugby Club. One of the people that used to be involved in my rugby team, they've got the cardiovascular rhythm problem, and he dropped down dead on the cricket pitch. Everything that happens in my life is a message. And I was not warned of this event by the BBC, but when we went to Skye, the whole of England was cast into darkness, but my son and I enjoyed a trip to a fishing lake, which was one of the last times. We've revisited it again in 2012, a year after the doctors tried to get me sectioned, for the healthcare scam and the revelations of that, and we went to the same lake again with my wife, who was sharing at that time her income with me. She pretends that she had left me in October 2011, and that's the same year, 2012, that all of the Olympic jokes were shared about the killing of the Anzac troops. And everything that happens is a fraud. Everybody is slaves to the Rothschild family, and that's the reason my wife is divorcing me. It is really spooky. You can see that there is no cloud, it's the moon. That's the Celine Dion joke, in front of the sun. The moon goddess, and the Dionysius joke. Everything in this blessedly beautiful universe could be in the hands of the gods, and you can now see the rainbow colours up there. Everything is a message. I will make the video on the Rothschilds frauds and the Speculative Society in Edinburgh, and all of the judiciary members who are on the profiteering panels who are persecuting me in Scottish law enforcement as an appendage to the illegitimate Crown Office. Okay, that is amazing. I'm really glad that I noticed that. I don't need the news. I get the signals from the friends in the sky, and I know that justice is on my side, and eventually the villains at the Speculative Society will be taken down. They are leaders of the law enforcement sector in our country. They're led by John Lamont and advised by him, and he now has a conscience about his role in life and his capacity to steal from all border citizens. He's moving to Westminster next so that he can steal from all global citizens, and his in-laws that live in Roxburgh Street in my town, which leads right up to the Duke of Roxburgh's outlet. The Duke of Roxburgh had his throat cancer in 2009 when we came back, but because he's decent enough to step down and climb down and start talking to me, he gets salvation from the throat cancer for a few years, but it costs him a fortune because he has to go into the Harley Street sector to get that. It would be much easier for him to make himself safe by talking openly to me with his former wives and his current wife from America. All of them are chosen for him, so that the world can be cast into this chaotic state, and the Rothschilds make all the decisions everywhere. And their representatives that come and drink in the Dardanelles pub, which is where John Lamont drinks to for a joke. The Dardanelles is the route into the culling of British and Anzac troops in the Gallipoli campaign, and in the campaigns around the Black Sea where the Crimean War was fought. Even the French were prepared to fight in that one, and all of it is about sinking the ships, because they knew that none of the troops would be allowed to come home, which is why my father-in-law in the Probus Club left me his balaclava as the only legacy from their family. They think it's really funny to asset strip the trains. They think it's really funny that Richard Branson gets the contracts for the new trains. They think it's really funny that everything that happens in government is a war crime, and all of them profit from that. That's the dental sector, which has been asset stripped by Dr. Stephen Andrew Hancock's. He uses the middle name Andrew because he knows it's a joke about the non-existent saint. Like 19 countries have him as their patron saint. Yeah? So this will be known maybe as the Eclipse video or the beginning of the end of the corruption that consumes our world. You can see that the skies are getting bluer and bluer and bluer with the passage of time. And Robbie Williams was singing about eternity. And I just wanted to show you my web page and the links to this, which is going to be the next video. Okay, the next video is on the Speculative Society in Edinburgh, who are global thieves and genocidal leaders, and every name on the list takes you into my career path, and it will take me a bit of time to explain it to you. But go to Prof George Lee's and go to Revelations, his website, and then look for, in the index, Speculative Society. I made the mistake of placing it under paedophilia.uk.gov.inc because that is the cover that they use for their massive financial and legal crimes. That's why it's the law, Dad. That's what the devil's advocate's son says. You know, the son of the devil in that movie, Al Pacino, is in everything about globalized evil. Yeah, he's in the Godfather movie. All of the Godfather stories and all of the breaches of justice I have explained to you in the 300 videos I've made recently. And Miss Tom and her family are on the list on the Speculative Society in Edinburgh, with the Arbitnuts who are now looking for academic funding in Japan. All of the names I know. There's the Frasers that are on there. They're the Procurator Fiscals that work with Angelina Eilish, and she's in Oxford now, stealing from the kids in the operatic and theatre sectors. Yeah, all of it's coming out, and I'm really sorry that I was going to make a video when we had another act of God in this beautiful universe that the gods have created for us. You can still see that the sun is slightly dimmed and that we have long shadows. Yeah, it's just amazing, but it is beautiful, like everything that the gods create for us and everything that the humans despoil. The gods are no longer worshipped. The messianic frauds are worshipped. The charities are worshipped, and all of it is a sick joke, which is why all of the perpetrators of that get the cancers and the strokes and the cardiovascular accidents, and their heart suddenly stops beating, which is why I keep playing the Celine Dion song about the people up there that I know continue to go on in the beautiful universe that they created. So we might have to wait an hour, but let me show you some of the highlights of the Speculative Society. Or maybe that's why the sun went undercover. Everything that I am doing, I believe, is my destiny. Okay, it might be quite artistic to make a movie on that theme, but I'm tempted to break it into two. Let me show you the Speculative Society. Okay, it's highly censored for national security reasons, because it crashes the global economy in 2008, and Edinburgh looks ever so innocent. They were still the regulators for Otago University when we were accredited as a medical school in 2008, I think it was, and my department was the best in the whole medical school and had the biggest rise in its spectacular score. And then all of a sudden they launch the academic review on me, which is internal. It's not about global standards, it's about how you get rid of the decent people from your university because you're embarrassed by their decency. Okay, and all of it starts in Edinburgh, where the Vice Chancellor came. And let's just have a wee look. And the links to the crashing of the TSB and all of the big banks, and the links to the people that get their knighthood within days of me declaring that they are international criminals. Yeah, there's the list. It's alphabetical. This has been censored right up into the late 1990s is the last listing that we got of the Speculative Society. It's shameful. These are the people that take the ownership of the world away from its people and its politicians. And I've got all their director numbers. Some of them are cleverly covered up. More and more of them are being revealed. Okay, and almost all of them link into the Tale of Two Cities through the Dunedin connection. And the links to the registered premises in the Monterey joke that is shared in that Devil's Advocate film, Scottish Widows Bank PLC, everything that is crashed. The Ray joke, the Monterey joke, is the Murray Place registration of many of their virtual product scams. I've explained the Lothian 50 moniker that is the Rothschilds connection, and I've explained now that that is 916 Ponzi shells of the thousands that the Rothschilds then open up into their globalized empire. Okay, let's keep going because it's quite interesting. I was going to make a video on this TSB Bank PLC. There used to be a TSB Bank. It's now in the $1 trillion Lloyds Banking Group debt pool. The man Orterio, I forget the name of the boss at Lloyds Banking Group, whose mission in life was to sack all of the employees on the high street banks so that they could do everything electronically. He's a millionaire. He's Portuguese or Spanish, I forget. He's on the picture with Stephen Hester with the guillotine that made Stephen Hester and the Miliband brother flee the country the moment that I mentioned that common law should be loosed on these people. Okay, Bank of Scotland PLC, all of them, HBOS, Lloyds Bank, this is the registration. John Wood Group PLC, that's the John Wood at BP who will not give his people at Enios a pay rise. All of his activities are tax free. One of my neighbours likes him. We talked about that the other day. All of those banks are busted. All of them are busted by Ewan Brown in the same year that he got his knighthood from the Queen, who's illegitimate. The Speculative Society of Edinburgh, it's infamous. 1947 to 2002, at which point the whole thing has been censored. This is a very outdated listing, but I can embarrass everybody from Salmond through Donald Trump to the Ogilvies who've been sainted and to the monarchy that thrive from all of this treason. and the selling of Scotland in the referendum is an absolute scandal, which is explained by the secret society. Okay? The names are massive. The Arbuthnauts worked with me in New Zealand. They're neuroscientists, but because the funding is busted by all these bastards, Gordon Arbuthnot had to go to Japan with another Kiwi neuroscientist, because Japan is still run by the emperor that was persecuted by these people in 1945. Persecuted in inverted commas. Invited into the money stream when Pearl Harbor was bombed by him. Yeah, all of it is a massive set of crimes. The heroes are the villains. So we have an Armstrong on the list. Everywhere you go, Oxford, Yale, Harvard, Cambridge is listed. This is a Scottish secret society. The links to Forfar and the jokes about the Yom Kippur linkage are massive. The Cairnhill story, everything is part of the fraud. The Cairn CEO is on the court of the Bank of England with Dave Prentice. I don't think the Prentices are on the list, because they are working class people that have become billionaires at their members' expense. That's the Unison boss. There's Balfours, there's Bells, and I've highlighted a Bell further down because he's got a hyphen in his name, and he's in my town selling financial services. He leases his building from the Douglas Homes. Part of the story further down. Bissett Scherzinger, some of the names are really romantic. They take in the McKennas and Aberdeen, and the McKenna joke I explained in the videos about the Rothschilds links yesterday, and the links to Imperial College London and Miss Manningham Buller. Now pharma fraudsters in the Cheshire region, where my family were involved in the asset stripping of the railway sector, and the Welsh Prime Minister was very important. Lloyd George, the profiteer, he's not on the Speculative Society list. Blacks, Duncan Ian, Blackie, Blackledge, Blair. Oh, isn't that a surprise? Senior partner Anderson Strathern, director Edinburgh Fund Managers Group. Blair, John Woodman. Secret Society listing number 1733. I know some Blairs that have told me about the shareholders at Hearts Football Club, which was defrauded by the Tsar, that are shareholders, and they did really well out of the defrauding of Hearts Football Club. They're very close to me, and they talk to me, and they help me repair my camera when it gets busted, so I will not dob any more on them. His dad was a notorious mafia member in a region of Scotland that I dare not discuss in case the mafia take me out. Michael Moore might be linked to that, and the Irish sectarian problems. I'm not allowed to know anything about Michael Moore now. He locks me out of his office, and he is still the representative who's now going to be in a battle with John Lamont about who gets to be the profiteer in Westminster next in our region. Okay, so that's the Blair connection, not the Linton Blair connection to the genocides as far as I'm aware, but you cannot find Robin or Blair on the business registry so far, like Brian Cox at Dundee University with 5 homes in America. There's Ewan Brown. All of the global banking collapse and all of the old black banks and all of the old pension funds, they've gone under his watch. He's now employed by St Andrews University. He's still on the banking boards, and all of it is a scandal. There's the story about George Bush, Barrick Gold, and the links to the CIA, the money laundering, and Bill Gammell, whose cairn boss is on the court of the Bank of England with Dave Prentice. Bruce, have you heard of the Bruces in Scottish treason before? Yeah, they're banking magnates in London now. Bruce Michael, 2 entries. Bruce Gardine, Bruford, Buchanan, the boxing champion cover-up. And we were relatives of a boxing champion from the Glams Castle region. Burns David S, QC Advocate Depute 1991 to 93, Deputy Commissioner of Social Secretaries 1998, now Lockerbie Defence Lawyer for McGrahy, where the senior innocent in the United Nations, Brent Carlson, was brought down in the plane with strong connections to Jackie O's third partner, Templesman, and the De Beers Diamonds billionaire wealth. Gaddafi was a business partner of Tony Blair, UK envoy to the Middle East, who had him killed for keeping his central bank in his country's hands. Right then. Sherlock Holmes joke, Dr. Watson's, we're not down to W, there are several butlers. Those are the civil servants. War crime inquest chairs scams. Oxon, that's Oxford, lecturer at Edinburgh and Belfast universities. Author, that's Belfast, where they have sectarian problems and all of the banks get robbed by the sectarian leaders, and the Cahills are advisors to all of them, including Gordon Brown, who was the Chancellor at Edinburgh University, which hosts the secret societies and gives the governance instructions to Otago University in Dunedin, Christchurch, the English city which had the earthquake right in the epicentre of the church that sells fudge, and in Wellington, which is a legacy of the joke that they all share about the taking over of the English Central Bank when Wellington defeated Napoleon, who was also a full member of this team. By it, Andrew Lauren Campbell, solicitor with Morton Fraser, Edinburgh. They refused to defend me in my marriage case. Like all of the law firms, they have massive Ponzi shelves, and I believe that they might have links to John Lamont, who's an advisor to the Law Society in Scotland. I'm ashamed of the next entry. We're down to the C words now. Calendar. My relatives, they come up a lot. They married into the Evans family, who are the treasurers at the Borders Council, and opted twice to invest in the Icelandic banks, despite the letters that I wrote to them, and they refused to acknowledge anything in them. Camerons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ewan Cameron is a cover for the man in the CIA at McGill University who launched the terror tactics and the interrogation using ECT, which is electroconvulsive therapy, which is also used by the psychiatrists. The psychiatrists are further down the list. Cameron John Alistair, Cameron JT, Lord Coulsfield, Law Lord, Lord Abernethy, Law Lord, the launch of the Biscuit Empire, Cameron Kenneth of Lochbroom, Law Lord, chaired and refused inner house appeal of Robbie the Pict's interdict on Miller Civil Engineering in the Skye Bridge toll, which is a minor crime in their lists, because these are war criminals and they are all law lords, and that is why little Sheriff Drummond has quaked out of the Selkirk Sheriff Court, because he is proud of all of these people's role in killing Scottish troops in conflicts in the Tyrol, as the people that go into rehab as Scottish folk singers that sing about the Tyrol and the Scottish soldier being everywhere offshore and dying for their country. They're actually dying for the law lords that sit in judgment of the innocents. And the eclipse may be abating slightly, yet the sun is almost back to its full sovereignty, which will happen in due course. Okay, right. Cameron Kenneth John of Lochbroom interlocked to Lord Cullen of Dunblane inquest infamy, but bailed out for reputational reasons. That has all of the hallmarks of my investigations. That's Lord Cullen. Do you get it? Cull Odin, Lord Cullen. There is no God in that joke, but they think that they are more powerful than the gods in the skies. They've got a big revelation coming to them, and when you enter the court and you have to get down on your knees in front of the thieves, you have to say "My lud" to them, and you have to bow, almost like you have to curtsy in the Christian church, which is why they call themselves the Lords, because they understand totally all of those frauds. There's an NM Cameron. He's got no details. He will be a really sinister person. Campbells. The Campbells are coming. The traitors at Glencoe that led to the massacre. Chartered surveyors, arbitrators, BA Oxon, LLB, Edinburgh, QC, Queen's Council, every one of them are in that. It's the law, Dad. That's how we take over the world. Civil Service, Head of Justice Department, Ex-Development Department, Scottish Office, charged with delivering UK's first PFI PPP scam, the Sky Tolls. The bridge was built for 100,000. The profit stream when this was written was 8 million. That's without the inflationary trends that these guys insist upon. Cave David, Investment Manager, Securities Trust Scotland. Babylon Greenock Limited, dozens of Ponzi shells. Okay, Saltire Court. If you follow the money from Securities Trust Scotland, you find renewables, golf clubs, Ponzi schemes and hundreds of shells, but also Donald Trump, the protester about Alex Salmond's renewables. Dun Wilco 19212931294. A little bit further down we've got links to the Brighton laundering operations. Trump International Golf Club Scotland Limited on the same listing. Glens of Foodland Wind Farm Community Trust. Isn't that funny? And Salmon got away scot-free without any convictions for selling his country to these bastards. Clark Matthew Gerald, Law Lord, Lord Clark, as QC said Sky Toll paperwork was flawless. Considine Hugh Mackay, that's the Mackays that are the chief law lords for Scotland, appointed by Mrs Thatcher, resigned, Edinburgh Academy 1932 to 37. So he's a World War II criminal. Cosser, Cowan, Cowie, Craddock, Craig, the Celtic football team, Maxwell Davidson, non-resident Minister, Church of Scotland, Assistant Principal Minister of Labour, or that's CH of Scotland. That could be short for Switzerland of Scotland. Yeah. Craig TM, mechanical engineer. Now he could be the man that wanted to bring down the flats at the Commonwealth Games as a sideshow from their crimes. Crawford George Douglas, Crerar, Croker, Kroll, Crowther, Leslie Crowther launched. He has nothing behind his name. The big villains are the most secretive. Cullen William Douglas refused any petition on the Sutherland opinion. That's the Sutherlands that sent the colonists to the colonies. Live at Merton, and Merton is Oxford's richest college, where J.R.R. Tolkien had a laugh about global tyranny and people on the boards of all of the big banks, all of which were crashed, which means that they were asset stripped into private funds and suitcases. Curry James David Peterkin, ship owner, chairman of Jazz Curry and Co. son. Yeah, Curtis, nothing to declare. Davidson, which is why the Andrea Davidson fuss is made. There are three of them. Charles Kemp, Law Lord, Lord Davidson, no longer to be found on the British Business Register. I looked this morning. Director number on the Secret Society 1636. That's the Kemps, the financial criminals. That is the Davidson that is the cover for Andrea and all of her MI6 activities. Also, they could be crimes in parallel. One of our boyfriend is now in my town. I saw him and I said hello to him yesterday. He's hanging his head really low. And he's got that Roman nose that is the Jewish joke that Ali G shares with the free world. Derby, Peter Jared, Queen's University Sectarian Belfast, Master of Worshipful Company of Actuaries, Desane, Dixon, Dorman, Douglas, Hugh Scott Douglas, B.A. Oxon, LLB. The Robert Hamish Dixon is the sheriff at Airdrie, son of sheriff at Hamilton, where the Hessies came to try and end World War II and the body double was jailed for life. Isn't it funny that they can run the world this way since the world invented writing and imposed Roman law, and the Roman roads lead to the epicentre of frauds all around the world, even today. Douglas Hamilton, Lord James Alexander, QC, ex-Minister of State, Scottish Office, together with fellow Speckers, Noble, Grosser and Campbell, conspired to create the Skye Tolls cram. That is a minor crime compared to the globalist stuff that I am now revealing. And I started that project. An interesting character. Douglas Home, Right Honourable Sir Alec. See links to Harold Wilson through Bilderberg and the bombing of Egyptian revolutionaries in the Garden of Edin. That's the Garden of Eden joke, which is now the yeah men, Beatles, sing it and have a laugh at it joke, like the Yellow Submarine and Hitler's escape to protect the BP plant in Edin. Bad habits endorsed by Conservative, then Labour, Socialist Prime Ministers in the 1960s, when the Garden of Eden was still called Edin, and before the adjacent Ethiopia was brutalised by the Italians, or just after it. That's the Italian genocide in Ethiopia, which launches the Afro haircuts and all of the jokes about Gabriel Haile Selassie and the links to the Lion of Judah in the Jesus faked up story. Drummond Young, I've mentioned my links to Kev Drummond, the joker about the 5 Arrow project for the Rothschilds. James Edward Drummond Young, Law Lord, Lord Drummond Young. Duff, Donald Campbell McRae. Duff Ronald Roxburgh, B.A. Oxford, LLB. W.S. Duncan Duthie Dimmock Elliot. Gerald Henry Elliot. Oh, the Archers, Christian Salvesons. They've fled the country to innocent little Australasia since I left Kelso. They are the massive haulage company, and their house now belongs to a man who works for Reuters, which means that that man works for the Rothschilds as a news agent, and he's from Peebles, like Lord Tweedsmuir, the 39 Steps joker, and the Canadian Governor General through the whole of World War II, as Beaverbrook swept into profits that are untold as the head of propaganda, and his former colleague as the head of the Conservative Party was Lord Haw-Haw, who joined Hitler's team. Fourth ports, etc. Gerald Henry Elliot. Yeah, I had not realised that Christian Salveson, the local company, had fled for complicity reasons. Elliot, PR, Elliot Walter Archibald, Elston David Aitken. Oh, and the man who's now working for Reuters approached me in the supermarket last night as if they knew I was going to disclose all of this. He's in the fishing club. Yeah, and as is loads of those people that are linked into the little girl that went missing in Portugal, and the lookalikes for James Murdoch, and the lookalikes for the woman who had her throat cut in the Braveheart movie. It's uncanny. And the man who was my boss in Pharma sits at the back corner now as a deck chair. He's the lookalike for my boss at Welcome, who was Trevor Jones, on the Forbes rich list now. The Ferguson fuss I can now explain. I put those hyperlinks in this morning. Yeah, so Ferguson, James GD, ex-chair St Ivory, ch.val. and inc.trust, director Monks Investment Trust, Common Fund Managers Association. We're beginning to get a little bit sinister in the descriptions now, so you can no longer find the Common Fund Managers Association on Company Check, but I got loads of alternatives. The Monks Investment Trust Public Limited, click on it. The company, the directors and secretaries, Balfours, Currys, Toms, that's my wife's divorce solicitor, Grossarts, Barkers, that's the Chipping Norton set, the man who published the translation of the Bible in England. Bissett's, Aberdeen Asset Management, is currently their secretary. That's the Balfours who partitioned Palestine in 1947, and the 1947 settlements are still being paid to Edmund de Rothschild and all of his relatives, because they're the war criminals in chief, and they still run the world. And the Balfours live right next door, and I was born on their farm. They do not have the courage to look me in the eye, which is why they refuse me an honest fishing job on the beat that they own, in inverted commas, on the Scottish River. There are no rivers to speak of in the Israel that they created as a diversion from the globalist financial crimes. The next entry is Edinburgh Fund Managers PLC, registered in Aberdeen, carved up in Dunedin. Click on the links and you will see all of the links to the banking crashes, every accident that happened in financial services that leads to David Murray tucking everything away in his headquarters in Dunedin. Fitch, Ford, PJ, Forfar, Foreman, Foster, Foulis, Alexander Douglas, bookbinder. I thought he may be a censor when I read about the bookbinding link, but no, he crashes the TSB, he sells it off and explains all of the stories I've told you about the Ogilvy's links to the monarchs and the pharma frauds, the Arbuthnot's of Peebles, which I did not know about, and all of their interlocking theft projects. That's as far as I got this morning. I will extend it this afternoon, but I just want you to know the usual suspects. Frayne Bell, director results for William Frayne Bell. Click on directors. Amazon, McCall, the first man who profited from the building of the Scottish Parliament building, which is the third tier of democracy that we now have in Scotland, that every taxpayer pays for. Nothing that they do is capable of changing anything in Scotland. John Lamont has confessed that to me, even although he's a corrupted advisor to the Law Society and has relatives in Dunedin working in the university as professors in the biochemistry department, which has more sinister links to the profiteers than any that I know. I forgot to mention that Kurt Krauss, the Nazi, used to work for Texas University. That is the Rothschild Paris, Texas cover-up. And he came across to work with me, and I was working still with a friend from Texas University on the projects that we were working on for Belgium and the UCB firm. Yeah, taken over from the Germans in the town where they shared the joke about British Labour working as tax exiles. That's the joke about the Geordie guys going out to work in the Auf Wiedersehen pet story. Everything in my life is proclaimed in advance as an important mission by God for me to reveal for you. Okay? The scams are registered in Moray Place, which is the Michael, the Moray Eel joke. It happened in Monterey. Isn't it funny that Robert Louis Stevenson went to Monterey to launch globalism, and now Amazon does not pay a cent in tax, and all of the decent book companies and all of the authors around the globe have to pay £6,000 to get their book published. And if you're Naomi Klein, George Bush gives you £2 million in advance so that only their historic crimes are focused upon. And she now works on the global warming scam. She's a Canadian, like Celine Dion, who makes the joke with the Bee Gees about being gods and living eternally. Watch the movie, it's really artistic. It takes you into a mansion like Downton Abbey, and they have really lovely dresses and petticoats like they have in Free Paris. Mr. William Frayne Bell, Dunedin Energy Limited crashed. They were talking up the wind power scam. See Trump salmon above. When I left, there is a bell in financial services in the Dardanelles joke in Kelso. That's the Dardanelles, the route to your death in World War I. Famous for that. He leases the premises from Douglas Home, listed above as the Prime Minister from John Lamont's constituency and chair of the Bilderberg movement. Please do not talk about carpet bombing the Garden of Eden before Harold Wilson. Bilderberg socialist did. It's strictly secret for national security reasons. And these are the guys that run the pension funds now, and all of them condone the investment of the government-run pension fund, which gets a return of 1% on your investment. But the only thing that has going for it is that they have promised to remunerate you if they have a financial crash. Mr. William John Frayne Bell, EH21 7RE, Mr. William John Frayne Bell, KY16 9QQ. I have not opened those yet. You could go to my website and you could open them. Give me a call if you find that they're involved in war crimes. Otherwise, I do not have time for it at the moment. Francis Derrick Fraser, the Procurator Fiscal, when I first went to Jedburgh Law Court. The Lovitts, the only Jews I know in my region, they own vast tracts of the River Tweed, but they fall out with their brother, so there has to be separated onto the Scottish Bank and the English Bank. I work for the woman. Yeah, she's really lovely. She puts all of her time into working. She's really conscientious, and she's really worried now that they take her tax directly from their account when they hire agricultural labour like me. Every one of the labourers has to be named now, so that they cannot take the social security payments and be remunerated at £30 a day for being a slave to the owners of the River Tweed, who are now shamed out of that and declaring their ownership, so they become water quality companies instead. And they are run like the Lothian and Borders Police and Miss Patricia Tom, the non-limited divorce solicitor from Canada, with the Toms on this listing, and the Toms being Governor Generals in massive provinces in Canada. Yeah, what they've got is a common director and CEO called John Smith, so that they cannot be found out beyond the revelations that I've already made. Right then, and I did not meet the Fraser because little Kev Drummond was brought in to persecute me, and that was before I made the videos on Kevin Drummond, Jedburgh Sheriff Court, and the killing of returning troops for the Rothschilds' cause and the anti-communist movement, and to give the people in Glasgow the death sentence instead of giving them a decent pay when they returned from fighting for their country in World War I, or the Napoleonic socialist in inverted commas revolution, led by armies that were funded by the Rothschilds on both sides. Galbraith, Norman Dunlop Galloway, the golf connection, and the George Galloway cover-up. George Galloway is a shame to our nation. Like all of the other media and political presences, they are just puppets to this regime. But this Galloway, this Galbraith, was a ship owner, Sub-Lieutenant, Home Fleet. Galbraith William Campbell, Chair Tribunal, DHSS, that's the Social Security System, 1997. Chair Tribunal MAF, that's the Ministry of Agricultural Fisheries and Fisheries, which is linked to the Duke, what's the name of the man who sacked me for killing the fish during the period when you're not allowed to kill the fish? His name is Lord Sanderson of Bowden. That's Bowden, like Gordon Bowden, who is now calling the BBC to account and has defamed my wife for profiteering in the marital and divorce sectors, and that video is extremely articulate. It reveals all of her inheritable assets, and the fact that the man that she works for lives in a huge mansion in the Whitney region, which is the Prime Minister's constituency, but also the crime scene for the killing of Whitney Houston, the cover-up for all of the crimes of David Cameron. You've seen how many Camerons are on this list. Gillies William, B.A. Oxon, Professor, Head of Department of Celtic Studies. This is probably the man that profits from BBC Scotland broadcasting its rugby international in Gaelic, so that the profiteers that we met on the Isle of Mull, who are the parents, and they are pop singers now. I forget the name of that man. He used to play number 8 for Scotland. Everybody that I've met in my life is part of the fraud story. If his name comes back to me, Beattie, John Beattie, his son now plays. He put him in and out of the team when I stopped making accusations about his dad and the asset stripping of Scottish rugby involving the Hastings family, London Scottish, and its horrible sell-off to Bristol so that Bristol would not be relegated. And that's the Hastings who missed the kick in front of the posts. Andy Irving is a financial magnate in the city of Edinburgh, which is why he was chosen for the recent tour of the British Lions to Australia. And the British Lions get all my news on all the fraudsters right through the period between 2010 and 2014, when my wife actually left me because she overheard the discussions in the next room with people who are describing all of the fraud and the stealing of all of the assets from every British student. Her brother steals from students in the dental sector, and he imposes the right to work concept, which is CPD, on everybody in Britain. I've gotten away from the Speculative Society listing. They're far too clever in Chipping Norton to get involved with something like this, which is why this has been censored since 2002. Gillies, Godfrey AM, nothing to declare. He must be a really bad person. Gottlieb Jonathan, architect, like Hitler. Graham JAG MAM Phil, Master of Arts, a piss artist. Douglas Grant, Ian Robertson Grant, Robert William Grant, Lord Grant MP, Lord Advocate. Isn't it terrible that I've reported to these bastards the war crimes of Tim Spicer and his involvement in the lead up to the Scottish referendum, which could have made Scotland free, yeah, in inverted commas, were it not for the SNP's treason. Yeah, all of the knowledge that they now have about all of Scotland's fraudulent law enforcement and its links to the politicians in Westminster and Holyrood and the McCalls now, due to this video, the McCalls established, and David Steele of Akewood took over from them in the profiteering in the new Parliament building right opposite the place where Mary Queen of Scots had her lovers before they lopped her head off as part of the sectarian religious violence story that keeps the whole world troubled for all of its history. Grossart, Sir Angus MacFarlane MacLeod. That's the Grossarts in all the financial services, and that's the MacLeods of Skye that are in the sinking ship sector. Noble Grossart, Royal Bank of Scotland, Scottish Investment Trust, Director of Trinity Mirror, etc., etc. Sinister evolution that you just ignore the rest of the crimes. Hamish MacLeod Grossart, Director Martin Curry, ING, Royal Dolton. They make toilets. The last video I featured Michael Moore's Galashiels constituency and the Pale Marks, because those poor people, because they get robbed by the Freemasons. When they created the lodge in Galashiels in the 16th century, it had a force 5 earthquake. Maybe that's why they did not give them sanitation and underground pipe work, but they have to shit in a pail in Michael Moore's constituency, which is why they call them the Pale Marks. Cairn Energy, the fraud with the man on the board, the court of the Bank of England. Indigo Vision, Scottish Radio Holdings. That will be links to Ali Moffat, now the Chancellor at St Andrews University, and a profiteer and a millionaire from BBC Scotland, and the launch of fraudulent stories about Scottish genealogy and men who went to the moon in inverted commas. This is the same day that the moon has brought evidence forward. Okay? Guild, Ivor Reginald Guild, that's a colourful name. Ex-senior partner, Shepherd Wedderburn, Chair Dunedin, World Wildlife Investment Trust, etc. That's the Shepherd and Wedderburn law firm that refused to defend me in my divorce proceedings, which are now becoming a series of complicit gestures in these massive crimes against the world's people. Do you see that now, Miss Tom? Do you see your name appearing in every video that I make? That's what you are leading yourself into, because you're prepared to be led by the criminals that lead our world, and Canada, where you came from, who are now in charge of our, in inverted commas, central bank. Oh, I missed that guy. Christopher Murray Grieve, poet. Yeah. Hal Blander, nothing to declare. This is the H word, the Hal is place. Haldane James Martin, University of Stirling, Director Scottish Life Investment Capital Trust, ISIS. Yeah, that's the Egyptian myths. C&A, Shane and Tate. Arthur Campbell Hamilton, Law Lord, Lord Hamilton, now Lord Justice General and Lord President. Now is 2002, the rest is censored. For reputational reasons and to persecute the innocents. Sitting with Osborne, Speculative, and Gill. Gill is the director at Manchester United who bailed out, who's on the Olympic Commissioning Board, the Football World Cup Commissioning Boards, and all of the Ferguson scandals that we talked about further up the page. Yeah, and Skull and Bones Society, that's the warmongering skulls that no one's allowed to talk about, run by the universities with massive funds. Guess what this guy's allowed to do? Chaired the second appeal by Mr. McGrahy, meaning that at all times there was a speculative majority or a speculative chairman at all Lockerbie, De Beers, Templesman, Jackie O's third partner hearings. Hammond, Chambers, Alex, Chair, Ivory and Syme, now ISIS, the Islamic fucking menace joke out of Scotland, out of Aberdeen, with thousands of directors labelled Mr. Islam. That's the Michael Moore cover for everything that has removed him totally from Hansard. Director, Dobie's Garden Centres. That's relatively innocent, but it could be part of the shrubbery Rothschild joke, and it's right next door to impoverished Dalkeith, where the dukes and duchesses that are linked to the Buccleuchs and the Scots and the Walter Scots and the massive sporting profiteers and the pension fund crashing for all of the rural employees that work for them. That's the Buccleuchs. Yeah, all of it is a massive scam. Hamnet, never heard of that one, advocate and lecturer at Edinburgh and Bristol universities. It does not say boiler rooms, but you do not have to declare anything in the business world now. J.D. Hardman, nothing to declare. He could be a hit man. Yeah, with the gun in the tea towel. Like that woman's boyfriend, you know, the lethal killers that surround these people. Yeah, all of them are looking at the ground when I meet them now. Harris, PA, really sinister. Neighbours of the Rothschilds, sack me on the river, run Butlins. That may not be the same one. He's not Scottish. He's got a very English accent, and when he's here, he buys up all of the books on Rothschild history in all of the local book houses and vents. Harrison, Patrick Kennard, Principal Scottish Development Department. Thomas David Muir Hart, CA in Brewing. Harriet Watt used to do that. James Almond Hayes, Georgia Military Academy Theatre Director. Heath Peter Laughlin, BA Oxford, Professor of Philosophy, University of Edinburgh and Virginia author. Virginia, I believe, is where they had the Gettysburg cull. Blacks, whites, revolutionaries, slaves, elite homeowners, strictly excluded from the death toll. Heggie, CA, used to be a Kelsonian citizen when the care home in Yetton, which he ended up in, used to belong to the public sector. It's now a ruin, a private dwelling place, and right across the road in Yetton, my earliest school teachers lived. They're the most decent people in this story so far, but they're South African, which makes me a little bit nervous. LLB, Solicitor Bell and Scott Edinburgh. William Gebby Henderson. You remember me talking about them trying to marry me off to Police Superintendent Henderson's daughter? Instead, they put the slave to the Rothschilds into my marital oath, and they are still persecuting me for that flawed decision. I love my wife. If she comes back to me, I will still love her if she accepts the explanation for everything that she has tried to do in recent months. Brian Hennigan, writer, Vice Chair of Mediabase. That's kind of like a confession. The Mediabase, the Reuters link, the Scotsman linked. They've relocated their office, so I cannot call on them. Henry AC, Sheriff at Glasgow, ? Nothing else to declare openly. Henry Alexander Hebburn Scott, Lord Polwarth, resign 1947. Governor of the Bank of Scotland, Director, various. Kind of like previous miscellaneous. And it is just amazing. Robin M. Hodge, that's the Oppenheimer word. That's Margaret Hodge, the regulator myth, publisher of the list, events guide for Edinburgh and Glasgow, where they had the Commonwealth Games in both cities in my lifetime, and all of it now consumes everything on the telly, and none of these financial crimes appear, and none of this list has been updated since 2002, when we had really important events in the crashing of the global economy happen. Hogg, MA, Faculty of Law, University Edinburgh, co-author Professor Hector McQueen, Hollis Edward CR, architect, Media Arts, Napier College, now a university. Locals that work there include my boss on the river, who sacked me after I got scammed out of the job when I was trying to save Syria from the weapons delegation led by the head of the World Bank. Her name is Miss Kane. There are no Kanes on this list. She's a German. Holmes, HM, accountant, specialist in tax planning, Edinburgh, ? Nicholas W. Holroyd, advocate, ex-tutor, Edinburgh University, delict and civil court PT, I don't know what that means. William Thompson Hook, the hook on the end of this myth about the story about, was it Peter Pan and the crocodile shoes, and that also takes you back to the Auf Wiedersehen pet cast, who also appear in the film about liberating Argentina in inverted commas. Yeah, all of them are in the same joke, and it steals from the people relentlessly. George Archibald Hope, James Arthur David Hope, Lord Hope of Craighead, ex-Lord Justice General, son of 1399, that's Hope Honourable JDL, solicitor, son of Lord Hope of Craighead. Horden, MJW, nothing to declare, sinister linkage. Martin Huggins, director, Edinburgh School of English. Business consultant, Gordon H. Hunter, governor, Moray, it happened in Monterey House Institute of Education. Ingalls, family relatives of mine. Bingo readers at the rugby club. Now busted for cash, cannot afford a second team bus, with loads of laundering operatives in all of the companies that I've discovered, from the Lovett's Ord right up to the top of the river, right beyond Selkirk, and even beyond Peebles, where all of the crimes against the people are being committed by Christine Graham and Michael Moore MP, with nothing on Hansard, since I shamed him out of the cabinet and proclaimed that he is the director of companies registered in Dubai that are the massive shipping scandals and the P&O scandals with links to the Ku Klux Klan, and the name of the Costia Concordia vessel that was sunk in a harbour to take everybody's eyes off the massive crimes of James Crawford Roger Inglis and the Royal Bank of Scotland Limited, where his director number was SCO 46419, registered address 24 to 25 at the mythical St Andrew's Square in Edinburgh. The security guards on the door, I visited it. It's a beautiful building. It's like an art treasure in the heart of the Blackrock City. The security guards on the door are from G4S, like the Social Security Office, the law courts. The private security firm confiscated my Swiss Army knife in Durham, where I have a salary-less honorary professor, and they will not give me a job, but they give the job to my subordinates from the University of Sunderland, where the Zionist leaders make the films about the Chariot of Fire and the killing of people in Gallipoli because of the Mr. Bean joke, and the Gellert Sevens, that's G4S, police the Gellert Sevens. G4S and Halliburton, a capitalist mafia junta. Those are references to my web pages. Halliburton were involved in the asset stripping of Iraq after they had brutalised and flattened it. None of the contracts that were given to Halliburton were honoured. The local people had to rebuild their razed to the ground cities. junta, cartel, fascist, totalitarian dream come true. Click on any of them, and then you've got Jedburgh is in, adjacent to Michael Ancram's constituency. The beer is much cheaper at the Tory club as a consequence. Then you have a hyperlink to the Association of Conservative Clubs Limited, the registered address 24 Old Queen Street, London, SW1H9HP. Michael Ancram, the Marquis of the Lothian cover-up for the Rothschilds, is a director on the Tory club with John Major, the thief in the Big Six energy Ponzi scams, which I'm refusing to pay, and all of Scottish citizens should refuse to pay, because their criminal activities and everything they sold was created by ordinary working men in Scotland when I was aged 5 in the 1960s, and they killed John F. Kennedy to continue with this corrupted system. Ancram, John Major, Ian Duncan Smith, John Burt, Michael Patillo, the war criminal Panorama 77 revelation story, BAE Systems Limited directors, train spotters to hide his shame, HTP company check, Association of Conservative Clubs Limited. You can see the whole listing of the prime ministerial people. Tom Weatherston, the socialist who I used to play rugby with and is now one of our local representatives on the council, who I'm not allowed to talk to because I understand all of their trickle-down crimes and roles as slaves to national governments, to dismember local competency. Yeah, he used to be a Labour man, a socialist. He's an ordinary working man. He is now a Conservative because it's the only way you can get into power. The G4S staff at Jedburgh Sevens from Glasgow, where they have the one Commonwealth Games contract, despite the 2012 Olympic fiasco, were just doing their job, which any young local could have done for half the price. The staff at G4S came from Dumfries to Jedburgh, had never heard of blind King George of Cumbria, the illegitimate British monarchy hyperlink on my website, or Lord Condon, who is their boss, but found Princess Diana's killing to be an accident. In France, as we now know, it was an unlawful killing. I find the first director at the RBS rather amusing. Mr. Salmon may be forced to use the Isle of Man model for his currency. This was written before the referendum that sold Scotland back to the Crown. Directors gone AWOL with the Free French or in Jersey. Associates of George Bush Sr. Tell me about it. See Bush Overby, Cairn, Bank of England, the Warner Brothers scams in America, where the Nazis, like the Bushes, all get to change their name, and then they become the bosses at the Hollywood frauds, and all of them win Oscars for covering up world history. So that's the Prime Minister Singh is the other relatively decent person in this story, because he resigned in shame that when they resold the busted shares in Vedanta, that's the Cairn product, which is only coupons, they resold those coupons at 1/10 of the original price, and Prime Minister Singh in the turban in India bought into that, and he was exposed by Peter Eyre, Gordon Bowden and me, and he resigned in shame. Cameron still prevails. Gamal has resigned in shame. All of them are replaced by more powerful people that appear with very similar names on the interlocks to the Rothschilds and the connections to Auckland and Dunedin. Bush Jr. attended Gamal's wedding in Glasgow, his first wife raped and pillaged as head of the Prince's Trust before she was thrown out of the family, like that woman Kay in the Godfather movie. This is what he does to make a living wage. The RBS is ever so difficult to tie down. RBS in Ireland HQ hyperlink with trust status in Ireland, which means that they have to pay no tax at all. And the Mrs. Robinson joke about the wife of the woman sleeping with a teenager is just an obvious parallel for the Mrs. Robinson joke sung about by the scamsters in America. That is, what was the name? Simon and Garfunkel. So they make the song about Mrs. Robinson years ahead of the event, in the fraudulent sequence of events that are totally pre-planned. And all of it, Ireland never gets a life because of the pan-Atlantic, pan-British, pan-European treason, and all of its politicians are plants who have to quizzlingly sneak into the corner every time we reveal anything about their funding base and about their propaganda mission, to keep the sectarian issues sectarian and lethal. And nobody ever spots that that is all part of the fraud, tied into the Cahills, who have denounced me for my lack of authority and detail in research activities. That's the Cahills that are in the SAS and are the killers and are involved in the Calvary Hill joke about the place where Jesus was crucified. That could be sectarian in some people's tiny mind's eye. Paul Alexander Ingram made a video this week on Professor Ingram, friend of the British elites at Otago University. I gave him a lift from the airport. Thomas Theodore Scott Ingram, Ronald David Ireland, Sheriff Principal, Honorary Professor of Law, University of Aberdeen, where the Islamic terror threat is now hosted. R.G. Irvin. That could be connections to Andy, but we're not allowed to know. Really scary, the people that do not put their credentials online. Brian G. Ivory, Non-Executive Director, Halifax, Bank of Scotland, Director, Scottish American Investments. Ex-CEO, Highland Distillers, possible channel to George Bush via Brewlands. That is not my writing, that is the people that originally posted this website with much less insight than I am providing for you. The sun's now come back out. Can you see it? Good morning. Good morning, sun gods. Okay, Chauncey, Charles Eliot Chauncey, Law Lord, Lord Chauncey of Tullychettle. Never heard of that. Could be in France, could be in Switzerland. Look at the earlier video I made on the Rothschilds and Edmund D. Rothschild's global fraud. D.H.R. Jenkins, MB.CHB, nothing to declare. R.E.C. Johnson, all the Johnsons in the news. Jimmy Johnson was one of my heroes in the Celtic football team until I realised that he's just a cover for Lyndon B. Johnson, who sold his country into the banking fraud that is the Rothschilds in 1963, within hours of Kennedy's killing. Johnson Robert Smith, BA Cambridge, LLB Glasgow, Advocate Depute. ABM Johnson, Alan Charles Macpherson Johnson, Law Lord, Lord Johnson, dismissed interdict appeal at Inner House with false legal justification, refused knob-off petition to HM Queen Elizabeth II as per claim. Yeah, that's Queen Elizabeth II who runs the Crown Office in Scotland. That's the illegitimate Queen who's been the illegitimate Queen for 160 years since they killed blind King George at Cumbria, where G4S were summoned from to sheriff and police the Jedburgh Sivens, where the Marquis of Lothian now has a sick wife and is gonna close down the Christian churches in his region because I attend them. Alistair Graham Johnson, John Raymond Johnson, CA in investment trusts. The Honourable Henry Shanks Keith, Law Lord, Lord Keith of Kinkell, 2002, died 2002. Somebody's caught up with him. John Ainsworth Kelsall, BA Oxford, LLB Edinburgh solicitor. Robert Ivan Kenyon Slaney, tobacconist. The British American tobacco links to the Du Plessis and HRH, snuff dealer, ceased to be a member, died 1984. Caught up with. Stuart Ogilvie Kermack, sheriff at Tayside, where Anne Gloag rules the roost.
and launches the mercy ships for tax breaks for corrupted British doctors who get 40% of their salary from over-prescribing by volume from the pharmaceutical industry, with links to Pfizer, Texas, through Kirk Crews, the head of the biochemistry department in Otago University, Andrew Mark Kerr, BA Cambridge, LLB Edinburgh,